Hello students, let's continue with T.S. Eliot's poem The Love Song of Alfred Prufrock. As in the previous three sessions, we have seen that this poem brings to limelight the hollowness and hypocrisy of modern civilization. The poem reveals the psyche of a man who lives in the inferno of modern life. And Prufrock is the representative of that modern man. He is a representative of disillusioned modern world. Eliot presents Prufrock as an incarnation of modern man, well educated, over civilized, highly eloquent, but emotionally sterile. In the previous three sessions, we have observed that how Prufrock is giving expression to his inner restlessness, his indecisiveness, his sense of inactivity, his inability to interact with the people, and above all, the the very emotional sterility that is the theme, we can say, or that is the core concern uh, behind the portrayal of um, Prufrock. And this poem also works on the theme of frustration and emotional conflict that is the hallmark of modern world, with all these themes, with all these ideas to um, express. Prufrock further presents his very disturbed mental state. Let's see what he sees in this very extract, which we are going to analyze in the present session, lines 75 to 110 of this long poem. So let's continue. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor, here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? Here, Prufrock, in his very uh, the frequently used poetic devices, here again he is using personification, and he is describing or presenting evening as if it were a person sleeping peacefully and smoothed by long fingers. At first, this seems like a restful image, but the association of the evening with the sleepiness and fatigue is revised, characteristically, into something more insidious. With two uses of ellipsis in the third line, Prufrock suggests instead that the evening malingers, meaning that it is only pretending to be ill or tired. And the pauses in the flow of the line introduce a sense of unease into this peaceful scene. But ultimately, this accusation of malingering seems like a projection of Prufrock's own anxieties, since he, of course, is the one who constantly procrastinates, puts things off, and malingers instead of facing his fears. So, nevertheless, the sleepy mood of the evening seems to have robbed the speaker of any will he once had to take action. He is stretched on the floor, physically reclining, taking rest rather than standing up, and claims that he doesn't have the strength to force a crisis. For Prufrock, voicing his unasked questions, giving expression to his very thoughts, would be to disturb the staid domestic rituals of tea and cake and ices, a routine that is seemingly so established that any deviation would be a crisis. That is the hollowness of the modern life, that man, he couldn't dare to give expression to his own questions, the very question which is disturbing him, the overwhelming questions about which he has referred to in the very opening of the poem, but still he is more concerned about the domestic rituals of taking tea and cake and ice. and the same expression of hollowness, the same expression of emotional sterility in the modern life continues in the poem. Prufrock says, "But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I'm no prophet. Here is no great matter. I have seen the moment of any greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid." Here, the speaker, uh, Prufrock, he seems to desire greatness, as it is written in this um, fourth line. He seems to desire greatness, but he undercuts those pretensions at every stage. He describes weeping, fasting, praying, a set of highly emotional and physically extreme actions associated with the behavior of prophets. And mm, he just says that I'm no prophet. So a mere few lines later, however, he remarks that I'm no prophet. He describes that seeing my head brought in upon a platter. Student, here one thing is to be noted down, that in the second line he is talking about that one person beheaded and his head is brought into a platter. Here actually there is an allusion, a reference to Bible, the biblical narrative of John the Baptist, who was beheaded and had his head served on a platter at the request of Herod's daughter Salome. So the use of this allusion, the use of this device, this biblical narrative, knits the lines closer together formally. Even the speaker has to prove just how different his situation is from the life of John the Baptist. For example, Prufrock makes the reference to John the Baptist's head on a platter seem irreverent by describing his own head as now slightly bald, turning into iconic image into something ludicrous, something humorous. Similarly, he describes the eternal footman. Eternal footman in the second last line. Here is the reference, F capital. Here is eternal footman is death. So he described this eternal footman holding his coat but then snickering. Here again, the speaker, Prufrock, is putting an ironic cast on what would be an otherwise tragic moment. So here, Prufrock again makes use of irony, as he has made in the second line, where he's saying that my head grown slightly bald. So this is how Prufrock gives expression to the hollowness of his very existence, the hollowness of his uh, very approach towards life. That although he seems to desire greatness, but he undergets those pretensions at every stage, as we have seen with reference to this allusion to John the Baptist. Let's see what Prufrock says next. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question? Here, by this point, Prufrock seems resigned to the fact that he will not be able to escape the domestic rituals of cups, marmalade, and tea, and say what's really on his mind. He wonders whether it would have been worth to it, as he says in the opening line on your screen, uh, to even try to do something different. He compares the voicing of this overwhelming question. expressing his very state of mind, giving words to that very question which is biting into the biting of the matter, just as he bites into pieces of toast with marmalade. So strikingly, Prufrock is seemingly so used to the ritual of tea that he even conceives of his own thoughts and feelings using the metaphors of drinking tea and eating. He suggests that giving expression to his overwhelming question would be like squeezing the universe into a ball. This phrase here is used to mean that question is so vast, at least for Prufrock, that question is so vast that to ask it in this setting would scale it down to a much smaller size. So this difficulty seems to defeat Prufrock. His questions about the universe are so much bigger than the matter of his daily life that it seems impossible to ever reconcile his inner thoughts and feelings with the small domestic scale of the world around him. But over and over, again and again, the same overwhelming question is disturbing the mind of Prufrock, but he couldn't dare to say the words. He could not uh, express the very question which is going on into his mind, and perhaps that question is about a marriage proposal, as the setting which T.S. Eliot has planned for his very poem, this very poem. Now let's see what Prufrock further say. To say I'm Lazarus, come from the dead. Here again another allusion, another reference from to Bible. This is about King Lazarus. He says, I'm Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all. I shall tell you all. If one settling a pillow by her side should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all, would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile? Even when the speaker, this Prufrock, does imagine giving expression to his feelings, the results are disappointing. So here he imagines beginning with a great pronouncement, telling his listener, seemingly a woman or the person with whom he is sleeping in the same bed, that I am Lazarus. So Lazarus, as I have told you, this is an allusion from to biblical figure Lazarus, who was restored to life by Jesus 4 days after his death. So he said, I am not Lazarus who come back from the world of death. The speaker is thus presenting himself as a figure who, like Lazarus, can report back about things outside the sphere of human life, since he has seen the world after death. So in this sense, Lazarus is a figure like Dante's pilgrim in the quotation from Inferno, which is used as an epigraph to this poem, as we have seen in the first session on this poem, students. For having a reference to that very quote from Dante's Divine Comedy, you can watch the first session. Dante's pilgrim goes to hell and returns to tell the tale, and like Lazarus is able to tell the living about the world beyond our own world. However, in practice, this attempt to recount what he has seen ends in failure. So here Prufrock imagines for his interlocutor falling asleep as he speaks and seemingly bored and puzzled by what he has to say. So hence the line after I shall tell you all is broken. That's why there again there is ellipses, there is a blank space, there is blank space here as you are able to look at your screen. And then this break shows that the speaker is disheartened, or perhaps his companion protest what he is saying. So that's why there is a gap, there is a blank space. The speaker lapses into something close to an epigexis as he vainly repeats, Not at all, not it at all. This repetition affirms that the scale of his communication failure, his lack of ability to describe and articulate his feelings. So even in the speaker's fantasies, his attempt to connect with and communicate with others are never successful. His protestation that this is not what I meant suggests the difficulty of ever fully conveying the reality of one's inner life and experiences to others, emphasizing Prufrock's sense of isolation and inability to communicate. So, in this stanza, which continues after a space, after blank space, the speaker continues to wonder it if it would have been worth it. So it is still unclear to what it necessarily refers. What is that matter? What is this it? This it is an overwhelming question. But that what is that overwhelming question is that is not clearly mentioned until this line in this poem. And but the speaker seems to be wondering whether a real attempt at communication would ever be justified, given the ever-present possibility of misunderstanding and miscommunication. So the speaker is caught up into minor details. So let's see what he says about those those very minor descriptions. After the sunsets and dooryards and sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more. It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves and patterns on a screen. Here, the speaker, Prufrock, is caught up in the minor details of everyday life, as I've already mentioned. And what are those everyday minor details of everyday life? As they are visible on the screen in the very first line, the sunsets, the dooryards, the sprinkled streets. In the second line, he talks about novels, teacups, and skirts. So with all these minor being observed or being caught up in these minor details, the speaker finds it difficult to imagine anything beyond the everyday life. He just feels that the list of everyday objects, his list of everyday rituals or domestic items like teacups and dooryards has mixed up with more poetic or artistic experiences like watching sunsets or reading novels. So this very thought suggests a rather pessimistic view of the role of art in human life rather than seeing it as something that often offers a form of ennoblement. The speaker seems to see it as just another everyday object. To be more simple, we can say that Prufrock is unable to differentiate a cup of tea from the joy of reading a novel or from the joy of watching sunset. For him, all these things are equal. He can't differentiate art from everyday life. And at the same time, however, he also seems incapable of articulating just what it is that he wants beyond the everyday life. He claims that it is impossible to say just what I mean, interposing a level of miscommunication even between himself and the speaker. So it is not just that the Prufrock can't communicate with others in the poem itself. There also seems to be a rupture in his ability to communicate even with the reader who until now has had privileged access to the speaker's thoughts and feelings. So a sort of mm, confusion, chaos is created just because of this inability to communicate. The speaker, the Prufrock, has expressed frustrations with being unable to articulate his thoughts and feelings. So here in the last line, he imagines he imagines using a magic lantern to throw his nerves in patterns on the screen, essentially to outwardly project his anxieties so that his companion can read them and get a better sense of what he is feeling. So a magic lantern is a reference to what would now be thought of as an old-fashioned slide projector. A transparent plate featuring a painting or photograph would be placed over a light source and which would then project a larger version of that image onto a screen. So magic lantern thus magnified their source images, and their mention here, the mentioning of the magic lantern which magnifies the source image, suggests that the speaker is looking for a way to zoom in on what he is feeling in the hope of making sense of it. Yet even so, even with such technology, with the use of magic lantern at his disposal, the speaker is pretty pessimistic about his chances of being understood. So he repeats, would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window would say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. So he repeats this very phrase, and it reveals that this very phrase, would it have been worthwhile, as we have seen in the text which we have just done, that this very phrase he is repetitively using. Here again he is saying that would it have been worthwhile. This repetition reveals that it might not actually matter whether or not he bears his thoughts and feelings. Perhaps the image projected on that screen would still fail to capture what troubles him. Perhaps he would find whatever he sees there to be disappointing. Perhaps his companion wouldn't care. So in the last three lines, can be interpreted a couple of different ways. In one reading, we can say that Prufrock finds the magic lantern display insufficient. So his quick repetition of the phrase, that is not it. That is not what I meant at all. So reveals a despair that he still can't say what he wants. And alternatively, the one might instead be taken as referring to the companion who is implied to be a woman from the context of the previous stanza, as well as the word shawl is used. In this reading, the speaker fears that to expose the pattern of his nerves, his viewer might simply turn away from the exhibition, might simply not care or not want to know. So what would be the point? Then speaker wonders of making himself vulnerable, of revealing his inner thoughts. So in either case, whether the speaker is unable to make himself clear or his companions do not want to know what the speaker is trying to communicate, or both, the speaker, and here Prufrock, remains totally unable to connect with those around him, isolated once again by an inability to communicate. So student, this is all about the text which we have taken up in this very session. Here, Prufrock is giving expression to his inability to communicate, his weakness, that he can't dare to say the overwhelming question which is disturbing his mind. Um, he, 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 he is afraid of not being able to express well, and he is also afraid of the cold response of the listener. In both the conditions, the fear and the anxiety is there in the mind of the speaker. Fear and anxiety is there in the mind of Prufrock, and that fear and anxiety and that for inability to communicate is expressed this very text. What Prufrock says further about his mental restlessness, we will talk about that very response or reflections of Prufrock in the next session. That's all for today. Thank you.